Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome back to yet another Locked On Sound podcast. Joining me, as always, today is my co-host and co-partner, Hunter Trumbull.
How's it going, Willie? Today we're at a special place. We finally made a trip up to Lansing to, I'll let you guys say the full name of it here.
The Lansing Customer Service Center.
Customer Service Center. We have two really informational, important guests with us here today, and this is going to be a pretty interesting topic to go over. So we'll start off with what your guys' names are, titles, what you guys do, that kind of stuff.
I'm Shannon Stemley. I'm formerly a student worker of Dunn's, and I'm currently studying, working on my master's degree at Louisiana State University.
I'm Don Avers. I'm with the Wildlife Division with the Michigan DNR, and I am very involved with the waterfowl and wetland program as well as woodcock program, and I am, for this case anyway, the bird banding program coordinator.
So yeah, the main topics we'll be talking about today is a lot about banding birds in Michigan, kind of the information around it, all the data it gathers and stuff like that. And then I believe Shannon has some stuff to talk about what she's working on over at Louisiana State University as well. So I guess we'll just get an overview from you right from the start. You know, how many people you guys have for your team that bands, where you guys do it at in the state of Michigan, you know, the overview of it kind of thing.
Sure. So my duck banding team started in 2014, and I've typically had 4 seasonal workers work for me the entire summer to band ducks across southern Michigan. So it's varied since COVID. We didn't have anybody in 2020, but I had 2 in 21. So it's kind of varied, but usually we try to get 4 people on to do that, and they band with me. My students, I have a couple of students each year, and so yeah, they get to go out and give them a hand as well. My students really focus on data entry. All this data that they're bringing in from the field's got to be, put into the system. So my students do a lot of that as well. So
now, how many birds in a given season will the 5 of you guys band, you think?
So we average, I would say, close to about 2,100 mallards, about 2,000, 2,100 wood ducks a year. So yeah, it's busy. We're usually in the top 5 or 6 in the country for mallard banding and wood duck banding. So.
Oh wow, up here in Michigan too.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Can you give us an overview of what a day would consist of I don't know, finding the ducks, I don't know if you find a feed or a nesting ground or something, and then getting your hands on the ducks to band them? Like, what does a full rundown of going through a mallard duck look like?
So typically what we've got is a lot of preseason scouting, so we know where our sites are well before we can start trapping. We start trapping on July 1st, which is the beginning of the preseason banding period for the Fish and Wildlife Service. So by then we already know where we're going to be. These sites are very traditional. We found most of our sites back, like I said, in 2014 when we started. So we've added some sites here and there, but for the most part, we know where we're going to be going. We know pretty much how many ducks we should expect to get there when we're there. But we'll have traps down and bait in July, and we start usually banding last week of July, right first week of August, and it'll go from there. So typically my team is at the barn in the morning, and they're loading up a lot of bait and making sure that they have enough bands for the day and that kind of thing. And we run 35 to 38 trap sites a summer, so we can't run them every day. But they're baiting consistently, and then each trap is usually set once a week, so they've got so many to check on a Tuesday or a Thursday, whatever. Those are usually our big days. And yeah, they head right out to the first trap, and they get on it. So it's get there, crate your ducks out of the traps, band them, release, on to the next one.
Now, when you guys go in there and check your traps, is there a somewhat predetermined number for how many mallards compared to teal you're doing, or how many hens compared to drakes you're doing, or does it just kind of go off of what you get?
No, we band whatever we catch. So a lot of our traps, there's not a lot of mix. You'd be very surprised. A lot of our traps are very specific for mallards, and it's not by intent, it's just what's there. The mallards and wood ducks, which are 2 target species, aren't really intermingling as much as you might think. So we know ahead of time, just based on the tradition of how these traps have been going for years, that this is a mallard site or this is a wood duck site. So we should know what we expect. We put trail cameras on all of our traps, so we're really keeping close eye of what's been there, and we don't even set the trap until I know we've got enough ducks to make it worth our while. So we already know if it's going to be a lot of wood ducks or it's going to be a lot of mallards or, you know, that kind of thing, but yeah.
So you're setting the trap remotely?
Nope, we set them right there, so we'll bait everything like on a Monday, we'll go in there on, and some of those traps, we might set those for Monday to check them again on Tuesday. So yeah, we're there, we have to make sure everything is exactly correct. I don't want any issues with raccoons or ducks getting entangled in the trap, so we check everything completely over before we set it, so.
Now, how many birds will a single trap gather up?
So it depends. Because we do put cameras on these traps, we do know a lot of what's going on there ahead of time. So if I'm looking on the camera and I'm seeing, you know, 100, 150 mallards at a site, and the trap's not big enough, we're going to swap it out, put a bigger trap in there. But like I said, traditionally we know, you know, that these are good sized traps, and I should expect good numbers. But we've had them, I think the most I've caught in one of my walk-in traps has been 180, 190 at a time. The swimming traps aren't nearly as big. A lot of that is on purpose. I don't necessarily want to catch a ton of ducks in some of those traps. If we're going to run them all summer, I don't need to catch them all in one day. So I can kind of let that, you know, a few at a time, and so we'll catch, you know, 20, 30 at a time in those, and sometimes less, sometimes more, tens. But yeah, upwards of close to 200 at a time, which is a pretty good haul. If we can catch that, that's a good haul. That's taking a lot of time in the field to process that many ducks, so yeah.
Oh, that's pretty. I didn't think 200 traps a lot.
It's
that's a lot of birds to work with.
It's a lot of work. But that's one of the reasons we have 2 people on each one of our teams that are going out to, because you can't, there's no way you should expect, you know, 2 people to be able to do that quick. So I want them to have, you know, enough, you know, they work at a good pace, and I mean, we're aging and sexing every bird. We gotta make sure everything is good, and having, you know, somebody to help get those birds out of the crate. And, you know, another opinion, if you're, you know, this one's a little bit iffy, you can ask your partner and say, you know, between the 2 of them, so yeah.
Now I'm curious, how do you guys go about aging the ducks? Obviously sexing the ducks is, I think that's one part that's not so bad, but aging the ducks, how do you guys go about that?
So yeah, the sexing part's really easy. I think it's really easy. I mean, it takes some time to get it. I've been doing this a long time, so it's pretty easy for me, but the aging, in the preseason period of time when we're doing our duck banding, big volumes like that, we're looking at plumage. So we're looking at the tail feathers. They're some of the last ones that they're going to replace. So you're going to flip that duck around and you're going to check out the tail. And you're looking for feather wear and replacement. So as they replace their feathers with adult feathers, the hatchier birds, the young juvenile birds, they'll replace those with adult feathers. And so you're looking at the rate of how that's been going. If they have all adult feathers, it's an adult bird. If they don't, if there's any juvenile feathers in there at all, then it's going to be a hatchier bird.
So you worked with him on his team as a seasonal worker, right?
In a way, yes. I actually started as what's called a Glass and Scholar student. So when I was at Michigan State, which is where I did my undergrad, there's a program called the Glass and Scholars program that places undergrads that are in fish and wildlife type degrees with state agencies or other places like Ducks Unlimited and things like that. So they place student workers essentially with these places, and I was placed actually originally with a different unit in the division, which was the Public Outreach and Engagement Unit. So I started with them, did some things, and then I eventually started goose banding a lot, and then Don hired me as a student worker after my time as a Glassin was over. So I was a student worker for 2 seasons, 2 years.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Shannon impressed me with her, we're going to call it a spunky attitude. I really like having students that work for me who are very, curious, hardworking, that kind of go-getter attitude, and they're not that easy to find most of the time. And we were goose banding, and Shannon was out with us, and the first couple of sites we did, everything was going pretty well, and Shannon was listening really well, and she was, doing what I needed her to do. We get to a couple other sites, and Shannon's directing traffic, and I was like, that's right there, that's what I'm looking for. So when I had the opportunity to hire Shannon, I did, and Shannon was fantastic, one of the best students I ever had. She was great, so I miss her on a daily, believe me. She kept my life together. It was great having her work for me.
So doing that kind of work with them and getting the experience that you did over a few years, did you have some certain aspects you loved and then other aspects that you dreaded doing, or?
Yeah, so Don talked a little bit about
It's got to be some stories in here somewhere.
The data entry aspect of that. So, I mean, we're putting out a lot of bands, and those bands, every single one of them has to be manually entered into a database, the age of the bird, the sex of the bird, exactly where it was banded, and all that information. So there were many days sitting behind a computer, adult male, juvenile male,
Yep.
what location it is, who banded it. So that stuff's, it wasn't horrible, but I wouldn't choose to do it on the daily.
Yeah.
But obviously handling live birds, there's nothing like it. So it was always an adventure.
I mean, we're doing over 10,000 birds in Michigan.
Yeah.
Between our waterfowl, woodcock, peregrine falcons, and all that data comes into me. And there's auxiliary markers. We've got Ben's project with GPS transmitters, and so there's a lot of details for all that. And it's really nice for me to have it all come in, look at it, and say, "Yep, I'm going to let you handle that." And it's really good though when you have a student that can handle all that too, and you're just like, I don't have to worry about it, she'll handle it. So, but I do feel for her. I did feel for her often. And it's like all my students, it's like, oh, those stacks just keep getting higher. So yeah, it's a lot of work.
Catching the mistakes of
Catching the
random
mistakes.
things, are like, that's
Yes.
definitely not it.
Yeah.
not quite right, but.
So what kind of mistakes do you run into when you're filing that? Like just
Handwriting mistakes. You're writing in the field sometimes on paper that's getting soaking wet.
Yep.
Smudged handwriting, not knowing where you are
Yes.
is sometimes a problem. The woodcock banding program, they're in the middle of nowhere in some cases. So trying to figure out where they are to put the correct information into the system is sometimes a little bit challenging.
The woodcock bander group is challenging. They band 3 or 4 at one site, and then they're off with their dogs to find more. So there's never like, Canada geese will do 70, 80, 100 in one site. So you can do that data pretty quick, but the woodcock banders and they know that. I mean, it's the nature of finding woodcock and doing it. So they're very aware, but they're trying to do it by town range section, and we've moved beyond that years ago. So some of them are newer, and they're trying to do GPS locations of their site, and we're converting things, and it's a lot for 3 bands at a time. You're just like, good Lord. And we do average 850 to 1,000 woodcock a year. And so when you start breaking it down, doing 3 or 4 at a time, it's challenging work. Yeah.
Now I imagine handling a Canada goose can't be as easy or fun as handling a mallard or a wood duck, right? I mean, they got to get a little bit more feisty when you're trying to band them, right?
Canada geese are challenging, yeah. I mean, the goslings aren't so bad.
Yeah.
We don't band any goslings that are still yellow, fluffy, goslings. So they've got to be pretty good size by the time we're dealing with them. And then we might catch them in the corral when we're rounding up geese, but we're not going to band those small ones. But they're pretty easy. But you get an adult bird, especially
really angry adult bird.
they've been handled, especially some of these that are they were previously banded years ago. We've got a couple sites that have birds that have been there 10, 12, 13 years. They know the routine, and they are extremely difficult to deal with. And especially when you're new at it and you're tentative about how hard I can hold them and how it takes some time to be comfortable with them. And I don't have too much of a problem, but I've been doing it a long time. So for me, it's very entertaining to watch the new people. They show up and I'm like, come on, let's get the geese out of the corral. And they're grabbing them, and it's like, oh no, you better hold them a lot tighter than that. And it's not just their feet, they're beating you with their wings. They're coming at you.
Do you lose quite a few the first time or two?
You lose a goose banding with me, and you're buying everybody lunch. So there is definitely. You don't want to be losing geese,
You're paddling after your little goose.
That's true.
Just lost.
Yeah, our goose roundup involves a lot of kayaking, and we trap at a lot of wastewater treatment plants, that kind of thing, on those retention ponds. So, somebody's going to be in the kayaks, and not going to be me. If you lose a goose, you certainly are going in. So,
I loved kayaking. I thought it was great.
Some people do. That's what I'm saying. Now you're seeing exactly what I'm talking about. It's great.
Now I'm going to move on a little bit. So. You came here, worked for 2 years and under him, and then you went down to Louisiana State to get your master's, correct?
Yep.
And so what are you getting your master's in?
the degree, like I said earlier, is technically renewable natural resources, but my concentration is in waterfowl.
Okay, and then so like when you graduate, your hope is to do what or go where?
Yep. Ideally, I'd love to come back to Michigan. Obviously, it's my home state. I loved working for the division, so I would love to come back. The application, waterfowl biologist, biologist in general, but yeah.
Gotcha. And now that's a pretty specific degree you're going to get at
Correct.
Louisiana State, so what is your day-to-day when you're actually at college look like? I mean, how many, it's a very specific
Oh, it sure
degree
is.
field, so.
So, fish and wildlife graduate degrees are a little bit different than I think some degrees. So we have like a project. So I have a very specific research project, and then I also take classes. The way I've kind of decided to think about it is I'm a student, but my full-time job is my research project.
Gotcha.
So of course I have my classes, really stats heavy, specific waterfowl classes, management classes, things like that. But so my project very specifically is identifying the source origins of Louisiana harvested waterfowl. So I work with a few different species, but essentially what happens is I work with 6 hunting clubs in Louisiana and 3 hunting clubs in Arkansas. They collect ducklings for me from their daily harvest. I get a duckling from every single duck that they harvest. They freeze them, I bring them back to my lab, and I sit at my lab table and I age and sex every single duckling.
So your training here came in handy then.
It sure did. It sure did. For my species, I work with 7 different species. So I work with mallards, blue and green-winged teal, mottled ducks, pintail, gadwall, and lesser scaup.
Gotcha.
So I work with all of them. My hunting clubs give me a wing from everything. So part of my job is to sift through and figure out which species are, actually the species that I'm working with. Discard the rest of them. But so after I have all of my wings aged and sexed and such, I collect a primary feather from those. So those are the feathers that are grown up on the breeding grounds. So I just finished sending in those samples for what's called stable isotope analysis. So stable isotope analysis will essentially be able to tell us where that bird grew its feathers. So I collect my wing from my hunt club, I have my one little feather, I send it for analysis, and they can tell me based off of deuterium, it's getting a little fancy now. So basically it's the amount of hydrogen in the groundwater from precipitation things. I can figure out where that bird came from and put it on a map.
So are you collecting mainly like migration data from that, or is that just?
Yeah, so all of these birds are obviously harvested in Louisiana.
Right.
So we're trying to figure out where those birds are coming from. Obviously I have a range of different species. There are some species like mallards that we have a lot of banding data on, so we have a good idea of where those birds are coming from, but we're really interested in the specific species like green-winged teal who are breeding really far up into the boreal. We're trying to figure out where our Louisiana harvested ducks are coming from so we can better manage those areas where those birds are breeding.
Gotcha. Now, do you have any data you can share with us or not at the moment?
My feather samples just got sent in, so
okay, gotcha.
I won't have that back until a while.
Okay,
But
gotcha.
I'll have 2 years of data collection. So I have this past hunting season and then this coming hunting season as well.
Gotcha. So do you have another 2 years till you graduate, or?
About a year and a half.
Year and a half?
Yep.
Gotcha.
Way harder than my degree.
Yeah, mine too. I understood about half of what you said there, so.
It's rather complicated.
So I'm going to backtrack a little bit to something you said earlier when you were talking about the different species you guys banned, and you mentioned falcons and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you guys ban a lot of non-migratory birds, or like do you get any data from non-migratory birds that kind of stick to their region, or do you just avoid those?
No, so because it's, the way that our program is funded, we are focusing on the species that we have quotas given to us from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So we are focused on getting, we have a quota of 2,400 Canada geese. We crush that every year. 2,000 mallards and 1,100 wood ducks. And that's the minimum that they feel that we need from Michigan to be able to run all the analysis that they're doing on their end. So as a partner in a continental species like that, we want to meet our quotas minimally, so we do way more than that. But when it comes to funding, you got to be careful with where your funding sources are, what you can use that money for. So we don't have a need to ban others. We ban peregrine falcons. It's the falcon program. They just were recently delisted from an endangered species, a threatened in Michigan. So we've been banning falcons in Michigan since the 80s, and I say that like, we do it, but it's not a huge number. We maybe do 20 to 30 a year. It's not the easiest to get coordinated and all that kind of thing, but we don't do anything other than the falcons. And woodcock, like I said before, that's a game species, but we're doing close to 1,000 woodcock, and some years a little bit more than that a year. But we're focusing on the waterfowl because that's what our funding is requiring us to do.
Gotcha. Have you noticed any migration shifts at all over the past few years? Has it stayed relatively constant?
I wouldn't say over the last few years, but I would say when you start looking at one of the things that Shannon did when she was working for me was we took our recovery rates from our birds and broke it down by decade. And when you start going back into it's hard to do because we're banning so many more. This, when you talk about the golden age of hunting, this is the golden age of banning right now. The amount of data that we're getting is crazy compared to what it was back in like the 70s or the 60s. But Shannon went back through and got data from all of those decades and put together maps, and you could see how our birds are adjusting to not flying as far south. So when you hear the southern states saying we're not getting these birds, our band data shows that our mallards don't really go too far. If they leave Michigan at all, they're going to, as far south as like the Ohio River Valley, basically just like our geese, they go as far as they have to find open water and food. So there's not a lot of ice and snow, that's where they'll be. Our birds are shot all over the Atlantic and Mississippi flyway, obviously, but not the volume that you would think. Most of our birds are, they have to be pushed out of here. And wood ducks are completely different. They have behaved the same now as they always did. And wood ducks make a big jump from Michigan down to the Gulf Coast or to the Atlantic coast of like South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, into Florida, and they have been doing that. That's just how they've always behaved, so that hasn't really changed. But mallards and geese for sure have short-stopped a lot more than what they used to.
Do you attribute that just to milder winters, or?
Yeah, I mean that's what, I don't. It's just the observations when you start looking at like I said, the data is what it is. The hunters are providing all of that data back by where they're shooting our birds. So when you start looking at it, and yeah, there's fewer hunters, so you're probably having fewer people shooting banded birds, but the volume of bands we're putting out is helping with that. So when you're looking at it across the entire flyway, yeah, I mean it's fairly obvious that the milder winters, we didn't have much of a winter this year, and our birds, even if they do leave, the geese are pretty well known. They'll fly out for a storm into Indiana, Ohio, maybe even Kentucky. It warms back up and they come right back, and that's just how they behave. I think they're adapting really, really well to what the weather's doing these days. So climate change is what it is. It's definitely changing how, especially mallards and Canada geese are behaving here in Michigan.
So with a less of southern migration being down in the southern states, do you think that their home population's growing at all to make up for that, or is it just they're kind of getting the lesser end of the stick down south?
Home populations as in birds that were hatched out.
Yeah.
So we in Michigan and the states up here are breeding states, so we have lots of breeding birds. Down in the south, that's a wintering area. So birds from north are going there to winter, and then they're leaving to go back to the breeding areas. So Louisiana really doesn't have high numbers of birds that are breeding in the state. Wood ducks, black-belly whistling ducks, and mottled ducks, and a few mallards and such. That's really their only breeding bird populations for waterfowl. They have resident Canada geese and such, but so yeah, their birds are coming from elsewhere, which is what I'm trying to figure out.
That's part of her project.
Yeah.
But that's the thing though, is as everything's warming up like this, if those birds don't go down there, they don't have birds. So Louisiana gets a lot of their birds from the Mississippi. They're coming down from the prairies and that way. But That's just not where our Michigan birds are going. So it's very interesting. Part of I thought when her project was announced and they were looking for a student, I thought it was a really cool project because it's going to be able to really show a lot of information that we couldn't get just with bands. Yeah, bands can give you, you know, point A and point B, but in between that, where you know, it's a small number of birds where she can look at, like she said, every single bird that they're shooting at these clubs and really get a much different view than what you can just with bands. So.
Right. Some species are breeding super high up into Canada and into the north, and banding locations like what we've done isn't super feasible. So birds like green-winged teal that I mentioned earlier, a lot of those birds are being banded already. They've already been on their migration for quite a bit of time, and they're getting banded in the United States. They're not getting banded up into their breeding grounds. So we're going to be able to tease apart some of that information with my results when I get those back.
And I think it's interesting that you said that, because it is true that just because we banned a bird here in Michigan doesn't make it a Michigan bird.
Right.
Those birds are, you know, especially teal. Yeah, by the time we're catching those in September, the teal season's opening is September 1st.
Right.
So it's very obvious that they are on the move before that to get to Michigan. Yeah. So do we have nesting teal? I mean, sure we do, but to a number like that, probably not even close. So yeah, that's probably one of the reasons we don't band as many teal, pintails, widgeon. We just don't have the volume of them breeding here to catch that many to band. So her stuff is, yeah, it's fabulous. So yeah, that bird can be shot in Louisiana and she can find out, you know, it came up from the very top part of, you know, the Canadian prairies. It's going to be very, very fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I had no clue you could even date their feathers like that to figure out where.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, but I never
it's crazy.
thought about it.
A lot of work using isotopes has been done up in like these breeding states in Michigan. Part of Ben's project has isotopes incorporated, but not a lot has been done in wintering areas. So it's gonna be a really big data set.
It's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, it really will.
It's going to kick off a lot of questions, which every good research project should. It's going to give us more questions to keep going on, so more students can keep working on these things. But it's going to be really cool. I'm excited.
Yeah.
So you said you'll have that data back in like a year and a half-ish?
I should be graduating in approximately that amount of time. So my data won't be available to the public until I'm actually done.
Gotcha. Okay.
Are you guys seeing a big shift? I don't know how much goes into it on like the GPS side of things, GPS tracking and watching flights back and forth, or I don't know how many of those are being put on birds, if they're a reasonable resource or if they're kind of every once in a while thing.
Like the neck collar sort of thing?
I don't know exactly what goes into them. I've never even seen a band. The first band I ever saw was a GPS tracked hen mallard down by us. But that was it. So
Jen probably put it on, to be fair.
There's probably a good chance.
Yeah. So I think so the GPS transmitters are a game changer for a lot of research projects. I'm sure that, you know, you've seen some of these neck collars where they've got a GPS transmitter attached to the neck collar, and that's a really easy way to do them with Canada geese. And we've done a mute swan project here in Michigan where we had GPS transmitters on the collars that we put on mute swans here in Michigan. For ducks, I think, yeah, it's an absolute game changer on how we can find more information about movement patterns and that sort of thing. The birds that we put, and we've helped Ben put on, I don't know, 120 some, and he's done way more than that. I think for his project, he's close to 400 transmitters across all the states that he's working in. Yeah, we're learning all kinds of stuff about these ducks, and a lot of movement patterns, but also nesting site locations where they're selecting to, you know, put their nests in and where they winter, and you know what. Yeah, there's just the answers are. It's how deep you want to get into the data. There's so much there. Like he's collecting a point like every 30 minutes of that duck's entire time it's out there doing it. So it's you can put maps together that are really interesting to see what those birds do. Some of them are really they're homebodies and they barely move at all. Others are they're very individualistic. The wintering stuff has been very interesting to me because I know where they go during the hunting season, but the hunting season ends and they're still out there somewhere. The transmitters are letting us see, you know, sometimes they're still moving We had several that are, wintering out in Virginia and that kind of thing, and it's pretty interesting what time of the year they come back, and we have Michigan birds on nests, and those birds are still not here yet, that kind of thing. So that was kind of interesting to see earlier this spring, how much later some of them nest. Others, we've had ducklings for some time, and we had others that are just now starting to get to really serious incubation. So they're all very individualistic, but stuff you really wouldn't know unless you could basically find out where they are every day and every minute of every day. So I think they're a game changer, and they're just going to get smaller, and we're going to be able to get more information on them as they get smaller. So.
Now, if your team is banding, you said about 2,200 a year is what you're looking at.
Yep.
Do you guys think you see relatively the same amount taken out of the population each year by hunters, or is there a growing number of banded birds? Like, is it? I don't know what I'm looking for, but
How many bands are shot per year depends on like how many you throw on. So like if you throw 22 on, are you seeing 1,000 of them die? Or I was gonna say I don't see bands being shot as a prevalent thing.
So yeah, it's so we look at what they call direct band recoveries. So if you put a band on a bird in August of this year, a direct band recovery would be the bird being recovered during this coming hunting season. So basically, it's not a whole cycle. It's just it gets that far and it's shot, and that's a direct recovery. So we track the direct recoveries very close, and we're very interested to see numbers, but also where they're being shot. That's how I can tell you that that Ohio River Valley is kind of one of the borders that we've got for winter. But if you look at just direct band recoveries, we're shooting pretty close to, for mallards, around 11.5% to 12% of the birds are going to be recovered that first year. And then it just drops off continually from there. Canada geese is a little bit higher than that, 13–14% of those will be shot the first year, and wood ducks is right around 8.5% to 9% the first year. So it depends. Over the course of the time of that bird having a band, mallards is like 20% of them will be recovered, and geese is 35–40% of those actually are recovered. So geese, it's a lot higher.
it's a lot lower than I thought it would have been.
I was gonna say, well, we can't find one, so I mean,
Well,
this makes sense.
yeah, but I also think part of it is too, you'd be surprised, the report rate isn't 100%. So not every band that somebody shoots do they report. Some people, they don't even know, they don't think it's a big deal to do it, so they'll just shoot it. And they'll have a band and they're like, oh, that's cool, but not really paying too close attention to it. Some people are obsessed with the bands, and you're gonna get those. So it kind of depends, and that's not accounting for birds that were shot and not found, and birds that are they die from other things too, vehicle strikes, wires, predators. Yeah, it's a whole bunch of stuff, and a lot of those are never recovered. People are never going to find them, so you're dealing with actually. I don't know if it's small. We're excited about 12%. That's a great number for us, but. It probably it sounds small, but it's a good number.
So we hear a lot of controversy about, just people we hunt with debating about targeting bands and stuff like that when you're field hunting for geese. Am I allowed to ask if you have an opinion on that?
Oh,
Does that really affect you guys? Do you like it because you get more data? How's that
No,
work?
actually we don't. So targeting is, it's a perceived issue. Could it be a serious thing? Absolutely, it could be. It screws up everything when you're, the randomness of the sample is important. So if they're out there, targeting a banded goose, for instance, or a neck-collared goose, or whatever, that special bird, it can throw things out of whack on, randomly. You need a random sample, but what you're doing is you're changing a lot of the randomness out of it when you're doing it. So it didn't make a lot of sense with that. I'm trying to figure out how to tell you this without, so I'll just give you this one. We've got a upper Mississippi flyaway states have had enough concern about Canada geese in particular that a project has been ongoing. This is year 3 of it, where we are putting black bands on Canada geese rather than the traditional silvery looking.
That was my next question. So you guys changed the color over to avoid that.
So we didn't do it on all of them. So it's a random sample to see if the report ratio is different for the black ones that you can't see as well versus the regular bands. And we'll do another year. We've put 800 on in Michigan so far, and we're going to do another 5 this year. And are they out there? Well, sure, everybody knows they're out there now because they started shooting them, so it's not a big secret or anything like that. But it should help to get an idea if band hunting, as it's called, is a serious thing or not. Is it going to happen? Sure. Has it been happening? Well, yeah, we know that when we used to put Canada goose neck collars on geese, those were targeted for death, basically. A lot of illegal hunting too, people would shoot them wherever they could find them. And so that we do know that if you put a collar on a goose, the reporting and the recovery ratio is off the chart. But that's how you find out, right? I mean, you can't you don't want to speculate too much, you want to know for sure, and that's one of the ways we know for sure. The black bands, though, are going to be interesting to see once they have all of these states participating. It's a lot of bands, it's like 3,000 bands a year across all the states. They should be able to figure it out pretty good if it's an issue or not.
I was going to say, a lot of videos that I seen last year of people hunting, they I don't know how, they always see the band in the air, but I do know a couple of videos people shot geese and then didn't know they had a band until they picked the goose up. So
that happens too.
I would hope that would help the mystery and the more making it not as everybody shooting at the same bird. We don't need, because I feel like it is almost like trophy hunting in a way.
Yeah.
You're hunting to put it on your lanyard. That's about it.
And I mean, I see it a lot of different ways. I'm a duck hunter myself. I'm a goose hunter. I understand before I was doing this for a living, that was awesome. My dad shot a couple of banded birds back when I was a kid. Pretty neat. I think a lot of it is there's this perception that they're very rare, and in some cases they are. But it's probably not as, I don't know, everybody's different. I don't find it as interesting, probably because I do it all the time. It's not as big of a deal to me, but, and I've shot banded birds and it's like, that's great. But I wouldn't target them. I think it screws up a lot of our data and it inflates numbers in ways that we really don't want, so,
Yeah.
That was good.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, so when you see a tracked bird, a GPS bird get shot, obviously that bird stops moving. How do you want the GPS back? I'm assuming because they're expensive. They've got to be.
Oh, they're expensive.
How hard, and if you know any kind of percentages in any way, how hard is it to get those back?
It's not that hard.
No. You just pull up and go get it.
So. I mean, yeah, in general, it's possible that way. So there's contact information on the side of the transmitter, and a lot of people who have found them dead or shot them, the first thing they do is, after they freak out about shooting a transmitter bird, is they get a hold of the contact on the side of the transmitter. And then and I say we, I mean Ben, there's dummy transmitters that are dead ones that don't work or are made that way, and Ben can swap them out. So if you wanted to, I don't know, mount that hen and say that, she's got a band on one leg and she's got a transmitter, you can have one that looks exactly like the one and we get the real one back. And if it's still in good working shape, we're going to want it back. However, we've had a lot of them that were shot that even a nick from a BB, either it'll ruin it, where it's just not going to work. They got a solar panel on top, so if any of that doesn't work anymore, we just don't want it back, and then you just keep it. And they're usually thrilled to be able to keep the original one, but we've had, I think Ben said, just a couple, maybe a handful of, they refuse to give them back, and they shot it, it's fine, they can do that. But part of the project is that if we get it back, it's in good working order, we'll get it right back out on a duck, and that gives us more information down the road. So
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that is.
I was so curious to see how that ordeal went down, because I know, especially with people that we work with, a lot of them, I don't say they don't care, they do care, but I think it's more of a, it's mine, kind of thing. Like, I'm not. But then I guess, it just depends on who you're dealing with.
Yep.
What else you got?
I had a question, but I forgot.
No, you forgot it.
No, I forgot. I'll go back to when we were talking about the colors of the bands. So you said you guys switched over and did 800 last year and 500 this year of the black bands. Is there a reason for not just switching to black entirely, whether it makes a difference or not? I mean...
So yeah, we did 800 the first 2 years combined. So yeah, we've got 800 went out already, and like I said, another 500 this year. So it was 500 the first year, 3 last year. Yeah, because they're not cheap. So I think that's the big thing.
Gotcha. I didn't know if it was price or if there was a
no, it's not.
better reason.
Yeah, so we had to have these are regular bands that were pre-coated, so we just don't want to deal with it. And yeah, it's expensive, but it's also, you don't want to, when you open the band and take it off the string to put it on the goose, that opening and closing, you can crack some of that. And so, you know, you can mar it up when you're putting it on with your pliers. And so it's not a convenient, easy way of doing things. We'd rather not have to do that. And to be fair, I don't know if we ever would. I don't think it's that important that we're gonna have to spend a lot more money than we already do on bands. So.
Budget would be well spent.
I mean,
places.
yeah, I think we can spend it better, yeah.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if you have any information on this or not, but I was looking through your guys' website earlier, in the lab's website, and they were talking about the avian flu and blue-winged teal, and how apparently they're one of the biggest carriers of it, is what I read on the lab's website. Do you know anything, the reasoning for that? Is there...
I don't. That's new to me.
It was a newer article that they had posted, but I had never heard of it before, and I was like, I wonder why. I don't know if it's because they travel more.
I think the only thing that I would speculate is exactly that they do travel extreme distances in migration compared to a lot of other birds. So maybe that was what they were talking about. But no, when we were dealing with AI last year, it was mallards with ducks and Canada geese. I think we found a coot, we found a mute swan, a few gulls, that kind of thing, a ruddy duck. But that's just my group. I mean, I know there was others finding birds, especially in the spring, but my group was mostly dealing Canada geese and mallards.
Gotcha. Yeah, their website says that the research focuses on blue-winged teal due to their widespread distribution and suspected role in spreading the avian influenza. Yeah. So I didn't know if...
Yeah, it must be a new paper that I haven't seen that one.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Teal. It's always something.
As I say, we don't see a lot of teal, in all honesty.
Not blue wings, especially.
Yeah, I've got some pictures of blue wings, but it's before season. I don't have anything during season. We killed cripple green wings last year.
Yeah, I think, what, 5 or 6 in the middle opener, and then a couple more in the shy.
Not many. But that was the first time we'd ever seen teal, so they're not prevalent.
Yeah.
No.
And I'm sure you guys, I mean, you're going to see them before we do, but I don't know how many teal you guys deal with, but...
Not very many. But green-winged teal, like if you go up to our managed waterfowl areas up on Saginaw Bay, green-winged teal are a big part of the bag limit up there, so they do shoot a lot of green-winged teal. Blue-winged teal have just always been that way in Michigan. By the time, that's why we have a teal season now, try to capture those, they migrate so early. And so if you can get on them, then that's great, but it's kind of hit or miss with blue wings always. Green wings are a pretty important bird for us then.
Gotcha. Now, I'm assuming you waterfowl hunt as well, right?
I don't,
You
actually.
don't?
I would really like to. I grew up deer and turkey hunting and such, but my
Okay.
family was never super into waterfowl hunting.
Just
so.
always been fascinated by the...
Sort of. So actually when I started as a Glasson, my bachelor's degree is not fish and wildlife. My bachelor's degree is in environmental sustainability. So that's why I was with public outreach and engagement. And then kind of everything changed. Kind of, it really did. So
It really did.
yeah, someone's to thank for that. But yeah, so I didn't really want to do anything with waterfowl, and then all of a sudden I was like, yep, I'm going to get my master's degree, and everything has changed. It's changed a lot.
Gotcha.
I mean, to be fair, I'm sure you guys can imagine if you are a young college student and you get thrown into the wildlife division and you get to be working with somebody like me who's going to say, we are going to spend basically 5 months a year doing nothing but chasing ducks. And once you do it and you are handling hundreds upon hundreds of birds, and you know, between the geese, and Shannon was very involved with Ben's project in the spring, catching hens, putting on transmitters. It's very involved, it's very hands-on. I think a lot of people get into wildlife work with the intent of, I want to handle wildlife, and what you find is a lot of people get into it and find that there's a lot of computer work, and it's a lot of dealing with the public, and you know, it's, you know, human wildlife conflicts, and it's like the opportunity to actually put birds in your hand and feel like you're doing something really important as far as waterfowl management. it can hook you. It really can. And the next thing you know, you're changing your whole career path because you got stuck with me, you know, and just because she was all, like I said, getting out there on those goose banders, and I was like, yeah, I want this girl to work for me, and it changed. Well, it changed things for me, but not nearly as much as it did for her. And but it can really do that. Ducks have a way. They do. You'd be surprised.
I've always loved birds, though. I grew up doing like 4-H and FFA, that kind of thing. So I grew up handling birds. So handling a goose was like,
oh yeah,
it's no big deal.
Yeah, she was a natural, and it was really easy for me to, like I said, have her work for me. And she was just like, I could just let Shannon go do her thing. She was fine. Yeah, it's been great.
Now, you said you've been banding since 20
years. as she laughs, yeah. So I started working for the Wildlife Division at the St. Clair Flats Wildlife Area in June of 1987, and I banded my first ducks that year, working for the the full-time staff that were down there, and so yeah, I've been banding ducks a long time. I hired in with the state full-time in '94, and I would say that duck trapping and duck banding is the only thing I've done every single year that I've ever worked for the division. I mean, I've done a lot of deer check work and goose banding and that sort of thing, but ducks have been something that I've been very fortunate to have done every year that I've been here. So I have handled and banded a lot of ducks. Let me tell you, yes, it's been great.
So the question I was going to go to off that, but now it might be reaching too far back, but did any of your viewpoints about how you hunt or your actual waterfowl hunting styles change at all when you started handling them in this sort of way compared to just hunting them, or?
I think a lot of my hunting of ducks in particular has changed somewhat. They act a lot differently during the summer than they do during the fall. I think one of the things that has struck me as a waterfowl hunter, especially a duck hunter, and I prefer to hunt ducks, more than I love hunting geese, but I love hunting ducks, is that they are very particular on where they want to spend the majority of their time. People, you would think that they're on the move all the time. They don't really do that. They are, they're kind of. Once they find that spot, they want to be there, and it can make it really easy once you figure it out to hunt them. In the summer, they're on the move constantly. In the spring, they're on the move constantly, but you can learn a lot just about their behavior when you're really, I get to do it every day, so I'm seeing things that a lot of people don't really get to see. I worked on managed waterfowl areas for a long time before I came to Lansing to do this stuff, so you see how those ducks behave, and you can have a better appreciation for people who are really successful duck hunters. There's a lot going on there, but sometimes when they want to be at a certain spot, if you can find it, it's on, and it's just their behavior, how they behave around refuge areas, so to speak. When they want to be there, it's great.
Well, we're coming up on an hour now, so I'll give you guys the chance to, if there's any information you want to say or give at all, or.
Not really. I mean, I'm pretty good. I'm always looking for people to work for me. Plug it away. I'm always looking for people to work for me. We post our jobs in February, and those will go out on the state hiring for the seasonal workers. And one of the things that the Wildlife Division has been struggling with in the last few years is finding people in southern Michigan that will work as seasonal workers for us, be it on a game area or I get a fair number of applicants on my summer positions, but getting people who are really able to do the type of job that we're doing is getting harder every year. But our game areas are constantly looking for people that can work for the summer. And if your future is looking at wildlife management, summer employment, doing our work is a huge step to be there. I did it for the whole time I was in college and for 3 years after I graduated. You build that resume and you get that experience, and you make a lot of connections that way. And I would be willing to bet the vast majority of people who work full-time for Wildlife Division were seasonal workers at some point, if not for a long time. Most of the people that I work with have done it. They did it for years before they got hired in. It's a great experience. You can learn a lot. I give it, if you are into wildlife at all, I give it high marks for you'll learn a lot. It's great. It's a great job.
Meeting people is really important in this field.
Very important.
I can imagine.
And it goes both ways. If you're really good, word gets out, and you know,
Or it turns into a job
Well,
in the future.
right. I mean, so it's a good example is her researcher, Drew, down in Louisiana State, was in Wisconsin as a waterfowl and upland game bird research biologist up there. He was working on Ben's project doing the Wisconsin side of things. So we knew Drew, and then Drew's like, I'm moving to Louisiana State and I'm bringing on a student to do this, and it's a duck project. And I was like, hey, you know what, Ben and I got on this, and we were like, so we've got a student for you. And then it was like, hey Shannon, you want to go to Louisiana? And she's like, so she applies, and this is how this all worked out. But you know, those kind of connections can, you know, I can't speak enough on, you know, just the networking that you get the chance to do and how that can work out for you down the road.
I think that's good.
Well, thanks for letting us come out and talk to you guys today, and hopefully we can follow up in a couple years with the groundbreaking research you're doing.
The groundbreaking research of Shannon.
That's true.
Yeah, that was great. Appreciate it. Thank you.